The birth of a child is supposed to be, a moment of pure joy. But when unexpected medical complications pop up, the delivery room can instantly turn into this incredibly complex intersection of biology, trauma, and legal rights. Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're unpacking a highly sensitive but absolutely crucial topic, Meconium Aspiration Syndrome, or MAS. We're going to take all the clinical data, the medical standards, and the legal framework surrounding the specific birth injury and break it all down. By the end, you'll have a clear understanding of what happens, exactly why it happens, and what families have to do in the aftermath. Let's get started.
Here is our quick roadmap for today. 1. Understanding MAS. 2. Warning signs. 3. Medical negligence. 4. Long-term impacts. And 5. Legal options.
All right, let's jump straight into part 1, understanding meconium aspiration.
So first things first, what actually is meconium? Well, it's a newborn's very first stool. It's this thick, sticky, greenish-black substance that's made up of things the baby ingested while inside the womb, stuff like fetal cells, mucus, and bile. Normally, a baby just passes this naturally within the first 48 hours after they're born. But here is the startling biological reality. If a fetus experiences extreme distress in the womb, particularly hypoxia, which is a severe lack of oxygen, it actually triggers the baby to prematurely pass that meconium directly into the amniotic fluid, meaning, while the baby is essentially swimming in its own waste. That hypoxia is the ultimate red flag that something in the womb is going terribly, terribly wrong.
And if a baby accidentally breathes in that contaminated fluid, it sets off a really devastating 3-step chain reaction. Step 1 is physical obstruction. This thick substance literally blocks the tiny airways and air sacs, the alveoli, which leads straight to lung collapse. Step 2, because meconium is a highly irritating foreign substance, the lungs mount this massive inflammatory response, causing a dangerous chemical pneumonia. And Step 3, and this is the kicker, it inactivates surfactant. Now, surfactant is that crucial slippery substance that lets our lungs easily expand and contract. Without it, inhaling is kind of like trying to pull apart 2 wet, sticky panes of glass, or trying to blow up a completely stiff rubber tire. The newborn's lungs just become incredibly difficult to inflate, which ultimately leads to respiratory failure.
Moving right along to Section 2, recognizing the warning signs. Imagine you're in the delivery room. Medical professionals actually have a very clear multi-point checklist to immediately spot this kind of respiratory distress. It starts with visual cues that honestly create a lot of mounting panic. Parents and doctors might first notice greenish or yellowish staining on the baby's skin, the umbilical cord, or even their little nails. They might see the newborn really struggling, rapid breathing, grunting, gasping for air. They'll also be looking for cyanosis, which is a bluish or grayish tint to the skin that indicates serious oxygen deprivation, or maybe a limp baby with poor muscle tone, resulting in a low APGAR score. Instantly, the response moves to diagnostic cues behind the scenes. We're talking abnormal chest x-rays that show streaky or patchy lungs, and blood gas analyses confirming dangerously low oxygen and high carbon dioxide. These signs are highly measurable, and they are immediate.
And when those red flags are that obvious, it brings families to a devastating pivotal question. Was this respiratory failure just a tragic accident, or was it a preventable medical error?
Which brings us to Section 3, the role of medical negligence.
Look, not every single case of MAS is malpractice. That's just a fact. But we have to look objectively at what happens when severe complications arise directly from preventable medical errors. Medical professionals are trained to a very strict accepted standard of care. This mandates continuous monitoring for fetal distress. It means recognizing the exact moment a timely C-section is necessary to prevent prolonged oxygen deprivation. It means having immediate respiratory support, like oxygen, mechanical ventilation, or even ECMO, ready to go. It also demands calling a neonatologist into the delivery room the absolute instant meconium is spotted. Negligence happens when that duty is breached. When a medical team ignores non-reassuring heart rates or delays a vital surgical intervention or just fails to provide immediate life-saving treatments. That breach, which leads to prolonged hypoxia, is the actual foundation of a medical malpractice claim.
Let's shift gears now to Section 4, long-term family impacts. Now, it's absolutely crucial to point out the dual reality of the syndrome. The good news, most babies who develop MAS actually recover fully within a few days to a week with 0 lasting problems. But for the severe cases, which are often the ones linked to that prolonged oxygen deprivation we just talked about, the trajectory of that family's life is altered forever.
The physical fallout here can be devastating. When MAS is severe, We're talking about chronic lung conditions like asthma or persistent pulmonary hypertension of the newborn, also known as PPHN. Worse still, if the aspiration causes a prolonged lack of oxygen to the baby's brain, it can trigger HIE, hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. And it's that specific lack of oxygen that ultimately leads to permanent neurological conditions like cerebral palsy and severe developmental delays. But the trauma doesn't stop there. It's immediately followed by crushing financial strain. Families suddenly find themselves facing absolutely staggering costs from extended NICU stays, relentless specialist visits, and lifelong physical, occupational, and speech therapy. It's a massive, massive burden.
All right, on to our final section, legal options and deadlines. So how do families actually secure the immense resources their child is going to desperately need? Well, to build a malpractice claim, attorneys essentially have to retroactively investigate the timeline we just walked through, and they do it in 3 specific steps. Step 1 is a meticulous, page-by-page review of all prenatal, labor, and delivery medical records. Step 2 involves collaborating with independent medical experts to point out exactly where the standard of care was breached. And Step 3, which honestly is the hardest and most vital link in the whole chain, is proving that this specific medical breach was the direct cause of the child's permanent injuries.
But here's the catch. Families don't have forever to figure this out. The statute of limitations acts as a strict ticking clock. Now, while many states have a general 2-year deadline from the actual date of the injury to file a lawsuit, medical malpractice involving birth injuries gets incredibly complex. Because the victim is a minor, many states have provisions that actually extend this deadline, sometimes all the way until the child reaches adulthood. But because there is such extreme variation from state to state, it makes it intensely urgent to act and understand your specific window before it closes for good. Because this intersection of medicine and law is so incredibly dense, getting expert guidance is pretty much non-negotiable. As this highlights, a qualified birth injury attorney doesn't just make sure you hit your deadlines, they translate all that dense medical data into a compelling case. They gather the records and the expert testimony that are absolutely necessary to build a strong foundation, one that actually secures a child's future care.
I want to leave you with a provocative thought as we wrap up today's explainer. We have looked at the precise biological triggers, we've seen the unmistakable warning signs, and we've outlined the rigorous standards that doctors are highly trained to follow. The medical roadmap to prevent severe Meconium Aspiration Syndrome is incredibly well documented. So, I invite you to reflect on this. If the standard of care is so clearly defined, why do these preventable birth injuries still happen in our delivery rooms? Thank you so much for focusing in with me today. Keep asking questions, keep analyzing the data, and I'll see you in the next explainer.